viewers, and welcome to our Top Notch Productions. This is your channel that deals with the digital content that we learn at our schools. We have been discussing the set books that are learned at our high school. And so far, you know the set books that we have been dealing with. Number one is Fathers of Nations. Number two is the Samaritan, and also the Silent Song. So I believe that you have been enjoying the programs that we bring along as we analyze and discuss these set books together with you. And today we would want to demystify the character of Chineke Chiamaka, the pastor of CIA Church in Lagos. And we want to relate his character traits with the themes that the writer is trying to bring out of this novel. Now, when you study the character of Chineke Chiamaka, the following themes come out very, very critically. Number one is neo-colonialism. There is religious hypocrisy. There is impunity, bad governance or poor leadership. We have corruption, injustice, family relations, and political intolerance. So we would like to demystify the character Pastor Chineke Chiamaka, but in relations to these things that I would want to bring to your attention. The first time that we meet Pastor Chineke Chiamaka is when the guide calls him at the Seamount Hotel. Of course, the guide has also called the other three Path Alpha observers. So he calls also Pastor Chineke Chiamaka and gives the same instructions of how to open the briefcase. And again at 9 p.m., that is at night again, the guide calls Pastor Chineke Chiamaka. And this information now we get in chapter 2 of the novel. And there is a heated conversation between Pastor Chineke Chiamaka and the guide. The guide first of all asks him whether he has seen the documents that are in the briefcase and whether he has familiarized himself with the same documents. One of the documents is the document about Way Omega. This document that has been developed by Nobel laureates are just trying to bring out the best way to develop Africa. Then the second document is Path Alpha. Path Alpha is a rival document that has been developed, in my view, by the West, so that it counter that has been developed by the Nobel laureates. And so the guide wants Pastor Chineke Chiamaka to familiarize himself with the two documents because they would really want to sneak in Path Alpha document during the African Heads of State Summit at Banjul. So as an observer for Path Alpha, Pastor Chineke Chiamaka needs to familiarize himself so that he actually supports Path Alpha. So that is the second time that you're meeting Pastor Chineke Chiamaka. Then again, as the conversation continues, the guide tells Pastor Chineke Chiamaka that he saw him at the Seamount Bar. And Pastor Chineke gets a little irritated by this statement. But what comes out very clearly is that the guide actually saw him at the bar and was trying to ask him what was it that he was doing at the bar. This actually finds Pastor Chineke unawares. But again, at the end of it all, the guide tells Pastor Chineke Chiamaka to apologize, even after he said that he was there just taking a Pepsi. Because this guy must have seen that probably Pastor Chineke was taking alcohol or any other thing that was not the Pepsi that he's talking about. And that is why he's telling Pastor Chineke Chiamaka to apologize. And that could bring out silently or insinuates something to do with religious hypocrisy. That could be Pastor Chineke Chiamaka is talking about being a pastor, yet he also takes alcohol because he was seen at the bar in the Seamount Hotel. Now, apart from that, we begin to see some aspects of neo-colonialism because at some level, the guide tells Pastor Chiamaka that he needs to familiarize himself with the two documents, but more particularly the Path Alpha, because they are supposed to support Path Alpha when they will be called upon at the summit to do so. So we realize that the brain behind Path Alpha is actually Mark Thatcher. Mark Thatcher is a son to the former Prime Minister of Britain, and that is Margaret Thatcher. And actually Mark Thatcher at some point recruited soldiers to wage a coup in the government, against the government of Equatorial Guinea. And actually Third Longway is part of the coordinating team of AGDA, and the brain behind AGDA actually is Mark Thatcher. So you can begin to see some bit of neo-colonialism. These people, they would want to sneak in a document that comes from them to counter the one that was developed by the Nobel laureates. As he concludes the call to Pastor Chiamaka, the caller tells the pastor, that is Pastor Chiamaka, of that encounter at the bar, and that also brings out the idea of religious hypocrisy, as I had stated. Now, the next time that we meet, or the third time that we meet Pastor Chiamaka, is when he's actually driving carelessly along the streets of Lagos. He's taking his brother Obina to the college, and that is the university. And he's actually driving against the traffic and carelessly cutting lanes and scaring and frightening other motorists and even the pedestrians. So actually we realize that Pastor Chiamaka is a very careless driver. Apart from being a careless driver, we can also learn something about impunity, because the way Pastor Chiamaka drives along the streets of Lagos is punitive. He's trying to punish the other road users, and he doesn't care. He cuts lanes and drives very carelessly, and it looks like even the policemen are not checking the roads very well, because how can someone be so careless? And we believe that there could be some maybe traffic policemen to check on how people drive on our roads. But we realize that he is driving carelessly, no one is actually checking on him, and he's really scaring and frightening the lives of other pedestrians on the road. So having dropped his brother Obina at the university, Chiamaka takes a wrong route again, and now he is headed to his office, the Earth Movers Limited, where he works. And he takes a wrong route, because this is the same route where we have a lot of traffic on Fridays, when worshippers actually takes or uses God's highway as they head for their prayers on Fridays, just to worship God. And therefore, there is a problem with the traffic. There is a human traffic, and still he drives carelessly as he actually dodges people and dodges other vehicles. And finally, something funny happens, that a fire engine, as he drives very carelessly, hits him from behind. Remember, he's driving a Mercedes-Benz. And when he's hit from behind, then the car actually flies and drops down in mangles. Fortunately, Pastor Chiamaka is not affected in any way. He is not injured in any way. He survives, and he calls this one a miracle. And when he looks around, even after that mangled wreck of his car, he realizes that the fire engine that had hit him has also disappeared. And that is the second miracle that he talks about. So because of these miracles that he survived such a terrible accident, and at the same time, it could have been a police case, but actually the engine that was involved in an accident with this car has disappeared. He counts that as the second miracle, and thanks God for that. And it is from that perspective that Pastor Chineke Chiamaka turns to God, becomes a preacher. So when Pastor Chineke Chiamaka becomes a church preacher, we are not told whether he went to any seminary. In fact, he did not go to any seminary. He learned preaching by imitation. He would actually imitate other preachers as they preached. And if it is through that he learned and preached everywhere, from every corner, from every street, from every shop, from everywhere, he was preaching. And that shows us maybe sometimes we don't get into worshiping God genuinely, because he never went to any seminary, but of course he learned how to preach, and preached all over. Of course, he was a very good preacher. But again, the theme that is coming out is that of religion. He now becomes a religious person. Of course, he didn't learn preaching from any school, from any seminary. But of course, the man that we meet, Pastor Chineke Chiamaka, is now a preacher. So at some point, he preached morality with coercion. He wanted people to change from their immoral behavior to God, but he coerced them. It was he was trying to force them to believe in God. But at some point also, he used the method we call persuasion. So he used both coercion and persuasion to preach the gospel of Jesus. And that actually brings out the theme of number one, religion. And there is also morality, because most of his preaching was about the moral behavior, how we should behave as human beings morally. Then, in one of his preaching, and that is the preaching that is titled "God is Watching You." It is, I think, one of the best preaching that Dr. Chineke has ever had, and it was in his church at the CIA, and he preached, and he gave a very concrete symbolism of someone who has just left his office and is going to where his car is parked at an isolated place. And while the person is headed to the car, then the person sees a black polythene. And in that black polythene, there is 10 million American dollars. And Pastor Chineke begins to ask a moral question. What would you do with that money? The first option would be to pocket that money or keep that money and forget about any other thing. The second one would be maybe to take the money to the police. And the third one is to go keep the money in your house and wait for what happens next. Now, in that kind of preaching, he is actually preaching issues of morality. So the theme of morality comes in. Whether we are able to do the right thing when we are exposed to certain temptations. Are you able to do the moral thing? So that was the theme of his preaching. He wanted to see how people would actually behave with that kind of scenario. Whether you are going to keep the money, you take the money to the police, or you keep it somewhere and wait for what happens next. So he's talking about morality. Then he gives a twist that while you have picked the money, then there is a God who comes from nowhere and sees you. Now, you have picked the money and you are thinking of keeping that money, and the God appears. How are you going to behave? In many occasions, you are going to fear the God who has seen you. But in many occasions, we must have the morality to know that God always sees everything that we do. And that is the turning point of his preaching. That whatever you do, don't look at the human being, but look at the Creator. How are you going to behave? Because God is always watching you. And that is actually the title of his preaching that day, that God is watching you. So what is it trying to create? That sometimes people are afraid of the human being that we see. Because that God, you could easily bribe him and disappear with the money. And that also brings out the theme of corruption. Because bribery is some bit of corruption. So sometimes we use the little that we have to bribe the police for us to do the wrong thing. Morality comes out here, but corruption also is brought out by this preaching. The following day, Pastor Chineke Chiamaka gets to the church, but the preaching now changes. He now castigates the President of the Republic of Nigeria because there's something nasty that has happened and the President ought to have acted and provided a solution. But the President has not acted and provided a solution. So he condemns this act where there is some rebellion between probably communities in a city or in a town, but the President does nothing about it, does not offer solution to that kind of situation. So he condemns this act. The following morning, Pastor Chineke Chiamaka is arrested and is imprisoned. Apart from imprisonment, of course it did not take long, I think it took 2 or 3 days, and on a Monday he was released. Now, when he is released, he is also banned from preaching, and that disorganized Pastor Chineke Chiamaka. Remember, he was very passionate about preaching, but here the government actually arrests him, and after the arrest, he's banned from preaching. So this one brings out the idea of political intolerance, where the government doesn't tolerate any form of condemnation. You cannot condemn a government, an African government, and this shows us the way the African government sometimes actually curtail what we call the freedom of speech, because he spoke his mind openly, but his freedom of speech has been curtailed here because he's arrested and banned from preaching. So that is actually how the life of Pastor Chineke Chiamaka has come out. And as I brought out the issues here, I have talked about neocolonialism when I bring Mark Thatcher and his idea of Agda. And Agda, remember, is the fire behind Path Alpha. We've also looked at religious hypocrisy when Pastor Chineke Chiamaka was found at the Seamount Bar. We have also seen impunity when he's driving carelessly on the roads and he doesn't care about other road users, bad governance and poor leadership. We have also seen this because anytime that you speak something against the government, then you're arrested and is even banned from preaching. Then we have corruption. We have seen where someone would bribe a God not knowing that God is watching you. And we also see issues of injustice because what is it that Pastor Chineke did that would warrant the banning of his preaching? Simply condemning the wrong thing that maybe the president did. So we realize that there's so many things that are coming out as a result of the character of Pastor Chineke Chiamaka. Finally, as we conclude, we meet him at the summit where the heads of states are meeting, and he is in support of Path Alpha. So that is the life and the times of Pastor Chineke Chiamaka. In terms of themes, I hope you have been able to see the theme that is being able to demonstrate in this text. Thank you very much, and may God bless you. Continue watching us. In our next presentation, we will be talking about engineer Sehiv Tahir and how his life and his character connects with the themes that the writer would want to bring across in this text. Thank you, and may God bless you. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, kindly do so, because you have so much that you'd want to prepare, to present, and probably help you also help our students. Thank you, and may God bless you abundantly.